And we're live, are we live?
I think we're live.
Good stuff, right. So welcome to Happy Hour with Ollie and Trish.
I'm Trish.
And I'm Ollie. I'm a sustainability specialist at 17 Seas.
And I'm the head of partnerships and comms. I have to do this because I always forget.
Basically, I joined 17 Seas since February. I worked I was studying environmental engineering masters in Copenhagen. And then I worked as a researcher for some time. Mainly in strategic sustainability planning. And then Tom and Ben picked me up and I joined the 17 Seas team.
Yep, and I was at Ministry of Black for a while and then went to WWF and I did a lot of different things. I don't remember campaign, strategy, events, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm at 17 Seas and doing partner relations and comms.
Yeah, but Trish has been responsible for everything you've been seeing today. She's done a great job.
Thank you.
And why don't you tell us about some of the stuff you've been doing?
Yeah, so just a quick wrap up of the day. Thank you for everyone who's joined so far. We started off the day with our founders, Tom and Ben. We did Wake Up with 17 Seas. They gave us a little bit of an update on what we do as a company and also like our projects and of course their new hires.
Us, clearly, ever since we've joined.
It became a lot better. And then the second thing was Ben did a fireside chat with Janet from UN SCAP. They did a deep dive into satellite imagery for plastic pollution on rivers. And then we also did a live stream of a podcast by The Economist featuring our very own Ollie and our founder Tom. And it was basically about plastic leakage in nature. So if you want to check those out, those are on our LinkedIn pages right now. So you can just go and find that. And then the other thing that we did a IG live with Tiffany Cromwell.
That was really cool.
Yeah, sorry, cool. I'm thinking about all the things we did because it's a lot. But we did an IG live. Tom did it with Tiffany Cromwell, who's a Blue Coast Brewery ambassador. And we did an exciting collaboration partnership with Blue Coast Brewery. They do beer and they did a limited edition beer, which is not this one, unfortunately.
We can't get it over here.
Singapore, yeah. But the beer basically removes plastic from the ocean, which is super cool. And we also ended up with a plastic waste in Indonesia talk by our general manager, Siti, and two environmental enthusiasts, Widika and Lita, who's also from Indonesia. And you can see that all on our IG as well.
Yeah, we have one more after this?
Yes, we have a last one at 9:30 on 9:30 Singapore time with our partnerships manager, Clara. She's going to do a quick tour around the brewery for Blue Coast as well as interview some of the CEOs there.
That's going to be really fun. I can't wait for that. But yeah, I mean, essentially what we're going to be talking about a little bit today in the happy hour, I mean, we've been talking about a lot today, but in this little short live is waste auditing. It's a bit intense. So that's why we've got the beers. Because we want to make it a little bit more lighthearted. But essentially, what is a waste audit? And I actually taught Trish this earlier. Why do we actually do waste audits, Trish?
So Ollie gave me a big rundown on what a waste audit is. I tried to memorize it, but basically it is to determine waste produced by a company or an individual, whoever we're auditing, generally their waste for a year, as well as the composition of the waste and why and how they produce this waste on a yearly basis. Right?
Exactly. That is, you've nailed it. And the thing is that today we're going to just give you a little surface value run through. Obviously, we normally do a more comprehensive waste audit, which involves a lot of other different aspects and metrics that we normally like to calculate. But for the purpose of today, we're going to be looking at Trisha's waste. Now, Trisha's waste actually is pretty good. She's 17 Seas, so she's a very circular zero.
I try.
So we had to collect some of the data for this. Not some of the waste for this, but we're going to actually keep it simple. We're only going to be sorting two types of waste today, which is going to be cardboard and plastic, and just to show you an idea of what kind of considerations we have. Now, how do you do a waste audit? Now, the first step is planning. So we've got to work out what type of waste would we normally sort. So what we normally do is we go to facilities. So whether it's an office or a vessel or a warehouse, and we actually look at what type of waste being generated, and we need to plan how is it segregated and how are we going to determine the total waste generation. Now, after we've done this, we need to start to think about what equipment do we need. Now, I always forget this, but the first thing is the table. Very important.
The table, sorry.
And don't forget the lovely bins that we have here, as you are obviously going to need as many bins as there is waste to segregate. And then personal protective equipment. Now, again, I'm not going to go into the details, but typically when we would do this, we do a risk assessment. So we have a site inspection and we start to see what are the hazards that we're going to face? Now, Trisha's waste is very, very non-hazardous. So as a result, she doesn't need much PPE, but that includes a mask, as Trish is lovely demonstrating. On top of that, we have rubber gloves. If it was more dangerous waste, whether it's hazardous or sharp materials, we'd use like Teflon gloves to just make sure that we're protected. So yeah, she's just going to put them on now as she's doing lovely. And then other things that we're going to need is more personal protective equipment, such as a first aid kit. We need hand sanitizers. We need wet wipes. Ultimately, what's interesting about this is that we are essentially dumpster diving, so it's a very messy job. It's messy business. What we need to do is make sure that everything is clean and hygienic. Exactly. Another thing that we're going to
sorry about that.
Another element is weighing. So what we actually normally do is we take some of the waste and we segregate it. We put it into its different piles, whether we're talking about segregating paper, cardboard, plastic, metal. And once we've got them all segregated, we would then weigh the bag and see how much of whichever waste stream we're looking at is in the total waste production of the facility. Now, after that, in order to get an increased level of detail and resolution, obviously it's hard for Trish to hold these with the gloves on.
It's quite big, sorry.
But essentially what we would do as well to get an added level is we sometimes look at the material, the composition in the waste and weigh individual components. So we're talking about plastic, we can look at weighing individual sweet wrappers in different categories. So we have like food waste containers, single-use drinks containers, carrier bags, small format plastic packaging items, these kind of things, to make sure we can see what consistency or how much that consists of the total waste. Nice. Now we're actually going to go into some sorting, and Trish is going to demonstrate that with her cardboard and plastic that we have here on the table. Again, normally when we'd be doing this, we'd be documenting it, we'd be writing it. There's a lot more that goes into this than actually just sorting waste. But this is just an introduction. If you want more information on a corporate level on how we actually run through the methodology, I can or reach out to myself or contact 17Cs, and we'll happily give an explanation. But just to keep things simple, Trish is sorting through the plastics and the cardboard. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of learnings that we have from generation of plastics and materials. So the first is that when we look at plastic, we typically look at the 7 different SPI values. So this is what the numbers are that are on the plastic. For example, PET, that's number 1. It's a very commonly used plastic, and it's highly recyclable and very sought after. And then we also have high density polyethylene, which is another really common plastic. What we're going to do now as well is talk through some of those issues that we want to address with some of the plastic waste in our waste streams. Now, the first of which would be problematic plastic. So this is stuff like polystyrene.
Which I assume is this one.
Yeah, so sometimes it goes by the term styrofoam, as you might have been familiar with. Now, the issue with styrofoam or polystyrene is that it's highly unrecyclable. And on top of that, it's really lightweight. So when we actually do our weighing, we put it on the weighing scale, it doesn't represent much of the data that we find, or it's not represented well in the data based on weight. But that being said, not only is it unrecyclable, but it is incredibly brittle, and it breaks apart very easily, as Trish has just lovely demonstrated. And the problem with this is that these small little bits of plastic, they break down and they leak into the environment. That's what's called plastic leakage.
Sorry.
Don't worry. But yeah, so plastic leakage, what that is essentially, it's when we have waste that goes into the waste management infrastructure, it sometimes gets lost. So that can be what we call a loss rate, and that can be through littering, that can be through fly tipping, and it can also be through unsanitary landfill.
So for the plastic we find on the beaches, is that considered plastic leakage?
That is considered plastic leakage, but how does it get from failing out of waste management systems into the ocean and into our beaches? That's a good question, and it's what we call the release rate. So not only do we look at how the waste management infrastructure is managed, but we also look at, out of that plastic that's lost from the proper waste management channels, how much of it ends up in our terrestrial ecosystems. These are things like forests and vegetation. How much of it ends up in our freshwater ecosystems, such as lakes and rivers, and then how much ends up in our oceans. And that's really what 17Cs does. We come and collect all of that leaked plastic from the environment and put it back in formal waste management infrastructures and recycling where possible.
Yeah.
Another issue, though, when we talk about leakage, and it leads us on to this, is small format plastic packaging. Again, we're keeping this specific to plastics, and we're keeping it very entry level. But if you want more information on other waste streams as well, you can always contact us. So this is an example, a perfect example of a small format plastic packaging item. Now, the issue here is that the loss rate for this type of plastic and this type of plastic, it doesn't change. If it falls out of waste management, it falls out of waste management. But the issue is that the release rates for the smaller plastics are a lot higher because they're very easily transmittable. So you take, for example, straws on plastic beaches. They are everywhere. The reason being is that they're lightweight, they're small, and they're very easy in getting into our terrestrial and freshwater and ocean ecosystems. So we want to eliminate these. So that's one of the main learnings that we actually have is, where possible, avoid small format plastic packaging.
Okay.
Now, another thing would be contamination as well. So back to we're going to give this as another good example of not just problematic plastic packaging in styrofoam, but also multi-material packaging. Right here we have a coffee or a drinks container, and it's both plastic and it's paper. So here is the difficulty, and it can't be segregated, and as a result it causes problems because there's plastic in this that cannot be recycled.
What about this one?
That's a great example, Trish. Yeah, so here we can work on separating the material as well, so that it can actually be handled in its individual waste streams and ultimately recycled. But in some cases, it's harder. Now, that also leads us on to contamination. So one of the biggest issues with recycling is contamination. So PET bottles and HDPE, they're normally used for drinks containers, and they're also used for chemicals and like bleaches and shampoos and stuff. Now, the good thing about them is that they're really easy to clean, they're really easy to rinse, and as a result, we're able to recycle them. Low-density polyethylene, this is 0.4 on your SPI values. This is actually really difficult because it comes in a film, and the film is normally used to package food.
Yeah, I thought those were not recyclable.
Yes, so they actually are, but they're very commonly contaminated, and that's one of the issues. And that's another thing that we actually look at in a waste audit. So typically, if we're looking at mixed recyclables, we can say, or any recycled waste stream, we want to look at it and see how much of that waste is contaminated, and how can we work to improve the cleanliness so that more of it gets recycled. Because if you have contaminated waste, then it quite often doesn't get recycled.
So wash all your plastics.
Wash all your plastics. And that brings us on to one of our other learnings, which would be wishful recycling. So quite often when we have contamination is a great example. Here you can see Trisha's holding up a cheese wax. But quite often when there's contamination or we don't know what's going on, we'll put it in a recycling bin anyway. And it's good, right? We're having this intention that okay, we want to help the planet, we want to recycle, but in some cases it can be problematic because it doesn't get recycled. It goes to a materials recovery facility where the lovely people actually go through the waste, similar to as we do with a waste audit, and they'll go and say, okay, this isn't recycling, this is, and they'll pull out what can be. Now, if we want to make those jobs easier and we want to increase recycling rates, we need to make sure that we have the proper knowledge to do proper recycling. So in cases where you don't know which bin it goes into, is it composting, is it plastics, wax has parts of plastics in it, has paraffins. When in doubt, always put it in the general waste.
What about plastic bags? Because there's always a confusion between whether you can recycle plastic bags or whether you can't. Is it like cling wrap or
Yeah.
not?
So plastic bags, they can be recycled. There are other issues associated with them. They can vary in terms of material types. So, but one thing I would actually state about this as well is that recycling depends on your locality, so your geographic location, and not just your geographic location in terms of country, but also regionally. So when you want to get more information about recycling, go visit your municipal government page. They'll give you all sorts of information of what can and can't be recycled. And it's quite a common misconception that we recycle based on the type of plastic. So whether it's 1, 2, 3, PET, high density polyethylene, polypropylene, these kind of things. That's not the case because you can still have a type of plastic which can be flexible and film. It can also be durable, the same type of plastic, and it has different compositions and quantities. So that's why when you go to municipal levels and recycling schemes, they'll tell you what the type is, whether it's a shampoo bottle, whether it's cling wrap, all of these, and that's where you can get the most effective information on how to handle your waste. But other than that, that covers most of our learnings in terms of the key areas. I hope that you learned something with this video. Again, this was a real intro into what plastic auditing is. And when we go into corporates, it gets considerably more complex. When you're dealing with offices and big facilities, the amount of waste that's being produced is enormous. And that's really where you can have an impact. But if you want to know more, reach out to myself, reach out to Trish, reach out to the team, and we'll happily tell you.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us for this quickie on waste audits. If you want to stay tuned, we have one more talk. It's about, what is it about? It's about Glucose Brewery. Yes, we're doing a tour on Glucose Brewery, and we're going to talk about our partnership with them, where we're launching a limited edition beer that removes ocean from the plastic.
Exactly.
Ocean from the plastic.
You keep saying that. I mean, there is more plastic. But that was Happy Hour with Ollie and Trish, and see you later.
Bye.